Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Utah Film Pod. My name is Josh Terry. I'm here with my co-host, Danny Hatch, and because we just want to make sure that somebody says something outrageous.
We don't get that enough from you, Josh, really?
Well, I keep telling you to edit out the stuff that I say that's outrageous, and, you know, until you start paying attention to my directions, I'm going to at least try to bring in somebody else who's going to get in trouble and maybe kind of distract from what I'm saying. Welcome back, Mark.
To make you seem tame by comparison?
Sure, right? Because we are so outrageous.
Cool.
You guys are wild, yeah.
Howard Stern ain't got nothing on us, right? or maybe. Okay, well, so how are things going, everybody?
Doing great.
It's been a little while since we got together.
Yeah, it's been great. Doing well and enjoying the movies and reading about them and reading about the Oscars and yeah.
That's right.
That's
we'll be talking about that pretty soon because by the end of we are recording this at the beginning of March, and by the end of this month, which seems a little late from my calculations, isn't that kind of weird to have the Oscars so late, like the end of March? Isn't that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, not compared to last year with a pandemic year, when it was in April. But
was it in April last year?
Yeah.
All I remember about last year, I just remember it being this weird one-room thing where everybody was really kind of quiet and sitting awkwardly at tables.
Right. Yeah.
We'll
have to talk about that. Yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more.
Yep. Yeah. Normally it's end of February, beginning of March.
Yeah.
And the nominations are early January, but I guess after the COVID year, they have decided to continue to move things back a little bit. Since the nominations were in February and the Oscars are at the end of March, so yeah.
Well, I guess we'll just be ready when they tell us to be ready, because nice. Well, so what else is happening? We got some news, Danny.
Yeah, no. Well, first off, there is the LDS Film Festival underway right here at the start of March. One of my favorite movies from last year is being featured, Once I Was Engaged, which I talked about on the podcast, and I wrote just my most favorite review. It's such a fun movie. So check that one out. And then we also have congratulations to the BYU animation department. I mean always, right? They pull out such amazing things.
A student Emmy nomination for a guy named Ethan Briscoe. He made a movie called Stowaway about a little baby kraken that gets onto a ship with a couple pirates, and it's kind of an interesting story. He actually was accepted to NYU's film school, and by the time they sent him an acceptance letter, he was already in this introduction to 3D graphics class at BYU, and then he just talked about how his whole decision to stay there was a huge deal for him. Like, it was almost like a spiritual thing. Like he met his wife there, ended up getting heavily into the animation, and then now making a movie that has been nominated for an Emmy. Congratulations to him.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yep.
No, I've had the chance to interview a few of the people from the animation department who've gone on to do work on usually Pixar movies. A lot of times when because Utah is such a strong market for kind of the Disney Pixar type stuff, a lot of times they'll have press junkets where they'll actually have different people come through town, and a lot of them have Utah connections, because of that. Usually that BYU animation program. So it's doing some pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, there were some of them that worked on Soul, the Pixar movie from was it last year? Gosh, I'm thinking
that was
2020.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, 2021 really was a blackout year.
Yeah.
No, I will always remember, because Soul was one of the few movies, I don't know. I mean, for one thing, it was one of the few movies that came out in 2020.
Yeah.
But I also remember watching it and thinking, okay, even if this wasn't a slow year, I would still really think of this as one of the best movies of the year, because I really enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Yeah.
That was
fun. And it was, I remember now, it won several Oscars. Not just Best Animated Feature. It won the score for I believe it was the same guys who did The Social Network.
And it was Trent Reznor,
right? Yeah,
right?
Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross. Yeah.
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 Okay, so we keep mentioning this, and we haven't followed through yet, but we have to have some kind of a discussion / episode, maybe / series about favorite soundtracks.
Oh.
Because I know we keep bringing that
yes.
up,
Absolutely.
but that's one of those ones that, when we're thinking of stuff, it slips my mind. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we all three of us will make a mental note.
Because I mentioned The Social Network, which it's one of my favorites, and yeah, that'll be a fun discussion.
No,
That
I
will.
feel like just totally intimidated because you guys know way more about music stuff, and I go with whatever the radio plays for me. That is my taste. So, but when it comes to like film soundtracks, like there are just so many I grew up with, so I'd be so excited to talk about those ones, and then you guys can judge me for them.
Well,
So-
I mean,
Oh.
we could differentiate between
I look forward to that.
we could differentiate between scores and soundtracks. Because what the radio plays for you, yeah, there's a lot of great film soundtracks
Yeah.
with just an awesome collection of songs. But then there's also like Hans Zimmer and John Williams scores, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Nope. Lots of potential stuff to get into, but
But that is
in
not
the
today.
meantime, that is not today. That is not today.
We're,
In fact,
we're
today
just doing a lot of teasers. All right.
lots of teasers. The entire episode is just going to be hinting at what we're going to talk about in other episodes. So thanks for joining us. It's been great to have you here on the Utah Film Pod. And yeah, no, we do have something to discuss. There is one major movie coming out that I don't know. I guess I never quite know what to make of big movies that come out in March, like this time of year, right? Because it seemed like, especially with the Marvel movies, they started pushing up the traditional summer blockbusters into like May and even April. But beginning of March still seems like, I mean, it's still winter, really. And so,
It's gonna
I don't
snow
know.
next week, so yeah.
oh, exactly. Yeah. And so, anyway, with no further ado, let's talk about the BatMEN. This is the latest of, gosh, how many different incarnations of this character on the movie screen. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this because if I remember correctly, you guys haven't had the chance to see it yet, right?
No,
I have
yet.
not. My
Okay.
next weekend is when I'm planning to see it. So
Okay, so I will give kind of a big picture surface level review. I'll do a little bit more in a written review, which by the time this comes out, I should have posted. And if not, just assume that I had life happen, I guess. But and then maybe we can come back and revisit it because I'm guessing you guys will have a reaction to this one. The simplest way that I would put it is that thankfully, gratefully, this movie was considerably better than I feared it was going to be. I watched that trailer. You guys have seen the trailer, right?
Oh yeah.
yes.
Or one of the trailers. Yeah, I mean, I just remember seeing a trailer like 2 months ago, and around the time I think we were doing like the 2022 preview, and I just remember like my heart just kind of sank. I mean, not that I really had high stakes on this, like I'm not really that invested in the whole thing, but there was just kind of this feeling like, ooh, this is going to be rough. This just is not, and I have nothing against Robert Pattinson. I really have enjoyed all the other, most all the other Batman movies. But the trailer just kind of really had me thinking, oh boy, this is not, it had kind of like this weird emo vibe. And it felt like they were just kind of rehashing some of the old stuff for no apparent reason. And the verdict, though, is that I liked it quite a bit. I mean,
wow.
it is very different. I mean, in liked it quite a bit, I would say probably a solid 3 stars out of 4, maybe 3.5. I think a lot of it was just the relief because I thought it was going to be just a slog. I mean, and for what literally and figuratively, because this thing is pushing 3 hours long. It is very. You could definitely criticize it for being slow. There's kind of a strategy behind that, which I'll get to in a second. But even in spite of that strategy, I think they could have trimmed it down, a half hour and wouldn't really lost anything. The plot basically kind of revolves around the Riddler is kind of the main bad guy. I mean, there are a few different villains in the movie, but the Riddler is kind of the main focus one, and he's going after several different prominent figures around Gotham. and Batman is already an established figure in Gotham, even to the point where he like shows up at crime scenes and interacts with other detectives and policemen, which is kind of interesting. He's not just kind of because remember in the the Christopher Nolan version, he was just kind of this. He would show up out of the darkness and talk to Gary Oldman and then vanish again. But here he's in a broad daylight a little bit more. And so again, this is not an origin story. It's really just kind of he's already here and established. He's been doing this for a while, and so it's just kind of about him solving this mystery and kind of figuring out what's going on with the Riddler. And I don't really want to go into a whole lot of it beyond that. But the thing that I would point out that I found quite interesting, and again, this is always whenever I talk about a movie that is based in some kind of a comic book type of hero, I always have to acknowledge that I'm not, fluent in the comic book stories and all that kind of stuff, and so other people might have a little more authority than I. But my understanding is that one of Batman's primary characteristics that maybe hasn't been emphasized as much in the movie versions is the idea of him being the world's greatest detective. And this movie really seems to zero in on that role, to the point where there is action, and there's some really good action, but this is not like a wall-to-wall action Batman type movie. There's a lot of, more kind of like investigation and, kind of detective work. And it really seems to want to emphasize the idea that the Batman character is not just this avenging, knight in the shadows, that he's a detective. And that's why I think that they slowed things down, and part of the reason that it wound up being 3 hours long, which is partially justified, but still probably a little more than it needed to be.
So it's I didn't realize, I never thought of the detective aspect of the Batman's personality. I guess like when you think of the Christopher Nolan versions, yeah, he does a little detective work. He has a lot of help from his old actor friends, Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine.
Right.
But that kind of makes me a little bit more intrigued, because to me it just looked like a very violent, dark, vengeful look at, I saw a review where the headline said "The Darkest Night" or "The Darkest Night Yet," KNIGHT.
And I would agree.
Yeah.
Like it is much more. I mean, so within this whole, I don't know, Batman universe, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the Joker movie from a couple years ago is the far end of the spectrum, right? Like that's the one. That's practically not even a comic book movie. That's really just kind of like this character drama that happens to be about a character who shows up in superhero movies, right? So the Batman is a lot more in that direction than any of the other Batman movies so far, but it's still kind of on the PG-13 traditional comic book superhero side of the equation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more moody. It's very deliberate / boring, however you want to put, because you can. If you still like it, you can call it deliberate pacing.
Yeah.
If you dislike it, you call it boring.
I've noticed that. Yeah.
But no, and so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that it was different. The action that was there was, I mean, this is one of those movies that it's still very much a PG-13 movie, but it's also very moody and dark, and not something that, I don't know that I would say it's not appropriate for kids. I don't know that younger kids would even enjoy it that much, because it's really the action is very sparse. It's good when it happens, but this is not a movie that is about let's do wild, cool things with Batman, even though they do some cool things with Batman. Like I love the new Batmobile. It's there's kind of a Mad Max quality to it that some of the other ones haven't had. I think Pattinson does a good job. He's not going to be my favorite Batman. I don't think he's the worst, and we can kind of talk about that in a second. But I mean, overall, I would definitely recommend it. I don't know that it's going to be anybody's favorite Batman movie, but in terms of justifying its existence, it did a much better job than I expected it to.
Yeah. No, it definitely sounds like it tried to make itself very different, and I'm glad it went with the detective route. My husband's gonna be so happy about that because this is his favorite superhero, and he loves the old animated series where it's mostly the detective work and everything, and he'll be so happy about that. So, I mean, I'm kind of wondering, like, with that, with the pacing, with that change, because I have heard just polar opposite reviews on this one. And so is that kind of what is making or breaking it, or is there something else where, you know, who would be the kind of person who would like this movie, who would be the kind of person who would not like this movie?
I would expect that if you really love the Marvel movies, if you like a lot of, I mean, I put it this way. For a long time now, with a handful of exceptions, DC has been seen as kind of the almost overly brooding, overly dark superhero world.
Right.
And Marvel has been the fun,
tongue-in-cheek,
more traditional, right?
Yeah.
Not taking itself totally seriously, but still really, really well done.
I completely agree. Like, I think the Marvel movies are actually underrated comedies. I remember when my wife and I went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy. That was probably the funniest movie we saw all year.
It was such a good movie.
It was so funny. And Thor Ragnarok is hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
Marvel's The Avengers, all the Iron Man movies are they're quite funny. And I've seen several of the DCU, is that what they call them? DCU movies.
Yeah, right.
And there's very little humor. I mean, it's like they do it on purpose. They're saying, okay, we have to distinguish ourselves from Marvel. We're going more of the darker route.
There's that, and then I also, you know, I guess maybe this is kind of a cynical take, but the assumption that I had was that the Christopher Nolan Batman movies were so successful that everybody at the DC, you know, offices just kind of got the idea that, oh, well, good comic book movies in the 21st century have to be dark and gritty and realistic, right? And so that's why we suddenly have like this brooding, dark Superman who still is basically wearing tights, but we put a really dark filter in front of the lens, and so everything is brooding now, and that just, you know, to me that just didn't fit. You know, I've really enjoyed it when DC has finally kind of let its hair down. Like, I love Shazam.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
This is funny. I can't remember if we might have talked about this already, but I actually enjoyed the lightheartedness of the first version of Justice League. Although I also have to admit that once I saw the Zack Snyder cut, I realized that, okay, well, this one also has some lighthearted, fun humor, but it's also tremendously better than that original Justice League. So, you know, lest anybody get the wrong impression that I'm saying that the first Justice League was way better.
That was my hot take, because I was trying to figure out how to explain to everyone why I liked Justice League, and I think I just had a great time going to the theater watching it. You know, I loved the whole cast. I think the Flash especially, he just stole the show. So much fun.
And Aquaman. I really liked Aquaman.
Yeah.
Now this wasn't funny, but I thought that Wonder Woman was pretty much not if not just the best thing, at least the only redeeming thing about Batman v Superman. Like, I just, you know, I don't know. And I guess this is kind of leading because, you know, for the sake of full disclosure, in addition to our Batman review, or the Batman review, since that's what it's called technically, we're going to talk Batman today. Yeah. And we're just kind of heading right into it. So we might as well just keep this ball rolling.
Well, speaking of a Batman versus the Batman, Conan O'Brien said that it should be called A Batman because there are 17 Batman movies.
Right.
You know, it's funny because we give Spider-Man such a hard time with oh, you're always needing a new Spider-Man movie. It's like, how many times have they recast Batman in the last 2 decades? Really?
Yeah, the Batman thing is interesting. Or Spider-Man has had 3 reboots this century. I mean, in the last 16 years, Batman at least I guess has had 2. But, going back from 89 through the 90s, that would be the first reboot after the 1966 version, I guess.
Well, Danny, if it makes you feel any better, I'm kind of rolling my eyes at all of the new Batman stuff as well. Like luckily they've been pretty good, right?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
that makes a big difference. I also kind of get the sense that, fairly or not, I think that there's a perception that Sony keeps rebooting Spider-Man just to hold on to property rights, not because they want to put out a new vision, right?
It's because they just have to do it.
Right.
Whereas DC's like wanting to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, I kind of question. I mean, I definitely enjoyed this new version of Batman, but if it hadn't come out for another 5 years or 10 years, that would be fine too. Like, I don't need new Batman movies in my life every couple of years, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I guess
So-
I guess you're
Go
right,
ahead.
Danny. Now that I think about it, there's the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale versions, right? Those three, and then there's Ben Affleck in the DCU movie. So this is the third reboot of the 21st century. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. No. Well, okay. So before we get too far away from it, let me see if I can answer your original question from like 10 minutes ago. My gut feeling is that if you really just kind of are used to the Marvel style comic book movies, you would react negatively to the Batman. If you already like the DC movies and kind of enjoy the more kind of brooding, darker stuff, this will be more of a natural fit or a natural transition. So I guess I almost want to say, like, if you just kind of enjoy movies on the surface and are not really looking for something different in the genre or more challenging in that regard, I could see people reacting in a negative way and saying, "Why is this movie so slow? And he's not fighting anybody. And why is he doing detective work?" And
Well,
Because that's his
but,
thing. Yeah.
I mean, and I think one of the reasons the Batman always they have these dark, gritty, brooding, as you say, movies is maybe they're trying to reflect the character, right? Because you look at origin stories of different characters, and Batman kind of has the worst one. First of all, he doesn't have any superpowers like a lot of these other superhero movies. And then you look at what got him started down this life of vigilante justice, and it's like watching his parents get murdered. Peter Parker gets bitten by a spider. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's not as many dark, horrible, like.
I don't know, man. Have you ever been bitten by a spider? I'm kidding.
If I was bitten by a
I don't think I actually
radioactive
have.
spider, that might be kind of cool.
No, but I think that's the mistake that DC makes, though, is that works perfectly for Batman because that fits his character. But the whole dark, brooding, oppressive, that doesn't work for Superman. And I don't think it works for Wonder Woman. I mean, these are, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think those are. I didn't think Wonder Woman was dark. That was actually quite a good movie. Not as much,
no. I mean, there's still a close kinship there to kind of the Zack Snyder 300 aesthetic. Like you can still tell that they're all kind of in the same family. But anyway, so with this new one out here, and which Mark, as you've pointed out, is now the third different version of Batman that we've seen. Well, really, in the last 12 years, because wasn't Dark Knight Rises,
Dark Knight Rises was 2011 or maybe 2012.
Yeah.
It might have taken a little longer.
Yeah.
And Batman Begins was 2005, so it's 17 years, 3 different Batman.
Yeah. So, okay, so without having seen the new one, there are still enough options out there that I think we can have a discussion about which one's best.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Have you done your your rankings yet? Because I would want to know where it.
Not officially.
Okay.
Let's let you guys talk a little bit about it.
Okay.
And then I'll. Well, no, because I got to buy myself some time to think.
I can tell you my favorite. I guess I have sort of.
Please, Mark, if you're ready to go, Mark, you take this thing and you run.
Yeah,
with it.
I have what I would call a sentimental favorite for sentimental reasons, maybe, and then also a my actual favorite. So my favorite one is The Dark Knight, the second one in the Christopher Nolan trilogy. I remember when I first saw that, I had actually just taken the bar. It was the night that I finished taking the bar, so I needed a good release. me and my buddy who also took the bar, we went and saw it. We already knew it was a big movie. This was beginning of August of '08, and everyone was seeing it like the week before. And it was like almost a masterpiece of a crime drama that just happened to have a superhero and a supervillain in it. You know, kind of like how you described, Joker just being this character study that happened to feature a villain, a famous villain.
Right.
And that's kind of how I felt about The Dark Knight. And this also goes along with Batman not having superpowers. So there's nothing supernatural in these movies. I guess, there's things that are probably nearly impossible, but and like, for example, how the Joker says he's just all about chaos, yet he has the most amazing, carefully orchestrated plans that any supervillain has ever created. No right. Bond villain could even match up to what the Joker does in The Dark Knight.
Right.
But I just thought it was excellent. The acting was great, as you know. I think it was perfect casting. Heath Ledger, you'd often talk to people, and it's almost like everyone agrees he's the best Joker, and you can't even really figure out who's in second place, And I think Christopher Nolan is just a great director. It was just like, it's such a good movie. I love The Dark Knight.
And now, did you say that it was your sentimental
pick?
No,
that's the best one. That's my favorite.
That's the best one.
My sentimental pick, I could just tell you, is the 1989 version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That year, my uncle got to take me. I was about 12, I guess, and my parents let him take me to a drive-in movie that was PG-13 called BatMEN with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, and
that's like dating when you're 14 or 15 years
I know,
old.
it was. Yeah, I would have, because it came out in '89. That was the year I was turning 12, and it was great. I remember it just being kind of weird too. Like, why does this guy have that weird makeup on his face, and what's wrong with him? It was, but I liked it, and I think there's this sort of, I don't know how to describe him. It's really what started the Joker as being such a popular villain.
Right, right.
Like, because he's so interesting. And I always feel like, and that's okay, but to me, the villains, and you hear actors say they like to play the villains, because a lot of times they're the most interesting character in a movie. They're the one that draws your attention the most.
For sure.
Yeah, I think he kind of started that. So, yeah, it was a big year, because I saw two PG-13 movies in the theater that year. The other one was a Weird Al Yankovic movie called UHF. And I was a huge fan.
Now wait, didn't Last Crusade come out that year?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, and I didn't see that in the theater.
You're kidding?
No, I think it took me a couple years on VHS, so...
Oh my goodness.
Once you turned 13, the appropriate age.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you had to deal with such challenges as a youth.
Well, I did,
How could you not see Last Crusade in the theater?
I didn't.
Well, that's probably for a different reason, a very different reason, Danny. So Danny, do you have an official pick and a sentimental pick, or maybe should I ask, do you even like Batman movies? Because we're kind of assuming that we all like these and have favorites, but I'm certainly open to the argument that maybe they're not that great.
No, I love Batman movies. They're typically my favorite superhero movies. I really just, that's kind of my first introduction to superhero movies. I think was the Dark Knight trilogy. I want to say, because Avengers hadn't taken off yet by the time I was watching those. Because I think I was pre-13 as well watching those movies. But definitely not Dark Knight, though. No, I think it's funny that you brought up the 1989 one, because that's the one I want to watch, because I think it would be my favorite. Like, on paper, it has everything I'd want. Like, I love Tim Burton, and I love Michael Keaton so much. Like, and especially after watching Birdman, I wonder, because I feel like, it kind of like plays into that, where he played some kind of winged vigilante, right? Sort of like, I think it's like that's why he was that pick, right? And I really really want to see that one. So that's my, like, I wish was my favorite one, I guess, but not in terms of, like, not because I don't love it, it's just because I haven't seen it. And that was the thing I was thinking about with this discussion, is, like, there are just so many I haven't seen, but I think it's just that I'm very familiar with the Dark Knight trilogy. And also I was just really excited for some, with the Justice League and with Ben Affleck, because he was my celebrity crush my teenage years. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. No, it just that's my type. That look right there. And so, but my favorite, like, I do agree. I feel like Christian Bale is my Batman. You know, because of that. And I don't know. Because I do agree that The Dark Knight is just a masterpiece. It's amazing, fabulous acting, fabulous everything, and I think it's because, you know, the series picked up so much steam with the first one that there was, like, bigger budget and all this stuff going on. But I love Batman Begins a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's such a great origin story, like the way that it's told, the way that it's shot. I love all the actors. I love Cillian Murphy a lot. I think he's just a creepy dude. So I thought he was amazing. I love Liam Neeson in it. Like, just everyone, it just, I love that cast. I love how everything's told. And then I felt like I never got that feeling again with the other movies. And maybe it's because it became a little flashier and it became a little darker. Whereas the first one just felt more, I don't know, grounded and kind of just, I can't find the right word for it.
Yeah. It's a pretty good origin story, too, because it doesn't just automatically bring a guy from, like, nothing to just a full-grown, fully fledged, fully automated Batman. You know, like, he has to work hard and go through all that training, and it kind of goes into that a little deeper than a lot of other movies. Like the 1989 version, it just seems to, he's already there, I guess, you know.
Well, because it's Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
No, just
yeah, like, he can do anything.
Well, so it seems like we're at least in agreement in that nobody really loves the Affleck Batman stuff.
Well,
and by or at least none of us, because nobody has said anything about those in terms of being a favorite.
I wanted to keep him, though. I wanted to have, I wanted that whole Justice League. I wanted that cemented. So I am bummed out about that.
No, I thought he did a good job. Mm-hmm. Like I don't have any issues with his performance at all. I think if anything, the movies just didn't give him a lot to do.
Yeah.
And so it almost kind of feels like a half reboot, you know, like, because it's not almost the same.
Like
we don't have the same amount of content
for Batman versus
well,
Superman.
well, that's what I mean. It's like, you know, they weren't Batman movies; they were Justice League movies.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point.
So he was there, but we didn't really get to see what, you know, that version of Batman was capable of. Now, I can't really say that there was anything making me desperate to see a lot more. You know, it was fine. It was good. Like I said, I thought Affleck did a perfectly good job. No, I mean, it's not very original, but I think I'm kind of in the same boat with you guys, where when I think about, okay, well, what is the quote unquote best Batman series? It's so hard to argue against the Christopher Nolan movies because they're so coherent, right? I mean, it's a very specific part 1, part 2, part 3 trilogy. The performances are so good. The whole directing and the aesthetic and all that is so good. I will say, at the risk of inciting hatred, I think The Dark Knight is a really, really good movie, but I think it's overrated.
Oh, I hate you.
I do.
I'm okay with that. To be fair, I've only been able to bring myself to watch it once because it makes me, like, nervous. I don't like gross stuff. So, like, I don't know. But I've seen, like, so many clips, and it is good.
It's very good. It's very good. However, my argument is that it gets most of its credibility. Well, maybe if not most of it. Frankly, I think you take out Heath Ledger as the Joker, and you just have a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's perfectly fine. It's entertaining. It's very well done. I love a lot of things about it, but I think that the reputation of that movie owes most of its success and its accolades to Heath Ledger, and I'd probably say that as much as I loved Jack Nicholson as a kid in that first Batman, Heath Ledger just did something that was
pretty amazing.
Really, really incredible.
Yeah.
Even if it bears a striking similarity to a singer that you guys ever heard this?
No.
Tom Waits.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old interview clip of him on YouTube on I can't remember if it's a Tonight Show or whatever, but it is startling. Like it's old too. It's like I think it's back in the 80s or something like that. Maybe in the 90s, but it's kind of like he's the Joker. Oh. He's the Heath Ledger Joker. And so kind of like the rumor is, this is where Heath Ledger got the idea for how to do his interpretation of the Joker. But I don't know.
Well,
I don't want to break the hearts of any.
Here,
so maybe feel free to cut that out.
Can I give an honorable mention to a Joker though?
Oh, please do.
Because I know you guys were saying like, you can't really pick a second. I mean, and I think Jack Nicholson definitely is up there, but also like I love it every time Mark Hamill voices the Joker. I think he's incredible with that role.
I've heard that many times. I've never seen any of the animated stuff, but I have heard that many times that Mark Hamill is kind of the dark horse MVP when it comes to kind of the Batman cast.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like
yeah.
In the 90s animated series, I love it. Also in the video games, like he is creepy but just like really makes those stories. He's so good.
Well, and I think that people are going to have a tough time eclipsing Michelle Pfeiffer for her performances as Catwoman, honestly. Like that this is why it's so hard, right? Because it's hard to say that there is a version of Batman that is better than the Christopher Nolan stuff. But those first two Tim Burton movies were really just such peak Tim Burton, right? I mean, that's kind of like these are the movies that like you kind of get the feeling that he was made to make. And between Jack Nicholson's performance and Michelle Pfeiffer's performance, and I'll always have a soft spot. I mean, I had been a fan of Michael Keaton for several years before Batman, just because he was awesome in Mr. Mom.
Yeah,
I remember loving him in that movie as a kid. Just a great little comedy. I think it was actually written by the '80s guy. What's the guy who did all the '80s movies?
Hughes?
John Hughes. I think he actually wrote Mr. Mom. Anyway. Yeah, the '80s guy. He's like on the credits for like 7 out of 10 '80s movies, pretty much.
Oh yeah, Beetlejuice. He's worked with Tim Burton a few times. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah, just great stuff. But then, I mean, I never saw Batman and Robin until a few years ago. I finally just kind of forced myself through it, and it lived down to its reputation. Batman Forever, I was kind of distracted at the time because I kind of got this crush on Nicole Kidman, and so I was kind of blinded to the fact that the rest of the movie really wasn't very good.
That's fair.
But the first two, the Tim Burton Batman movies, those were great, and it's interesting too. Like there's almost a trend with these movies where there seems to be a casting choice that just blows everybody's minds. Because I remember, again, having watched him in Mr. Mom, nobody thought Michael Keaton was going to be a good Batman. It's like, well, this guy's a comedian. This guy's funny. What are they casting this guy? And then, of course, when Heath Ledger was cast for the Joker, people thought that was ridiculous too. And in both cases, the BatMEN knocked it out of the park. That was a really loose, bad pun.
That's what I was thinking looking at this new Batman movie, because like I'm looking at that whole cast list, and I feel like you always have to have that just stellar, strong list there. And so I was super curious about like Paul Dano as the Riddler, because I think he's amazing in everything I've seen him in.
Yeah, and. here's where my ignorance paid off, because I didn't know that was him going into the movie.
I didn't know either
And
until
when
I
I
looked this up. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I found out it was him, when he kind of, because he's, call it a spoiler if you want, but I mean, he spends most of his time in the mask, and so you don't really know who he is. But obviously they're publicizing the fact that it's Paul Dano, and he's awesome. I really, his if only for his work in Love and Mercy, I'm always going to be a fan of what he can do.
That was great.
So
Wilson.
it was really cool to see him. Cool to see him in this. And then, of course, I'm looking at IMDb and realizing, as of right now, that that was Colin Farrell, who is the Penguin.
And heavy makeup, right?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, you would not have picked that out at all. So I don't know.
Paul Dano is also.
I did recognize Zoe Kravitz.
Yeah, Paul Dano is also great in Little Miss Sunshine and There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, well, and because There Will Be Blood, that was kind of his breakthrough, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't that one of the things that he really kind of made his reputation with?
Probably, yeah.
Because I know it was earlier than some of these other movies.
That was in 07.
We've been talking about.
And I think Little Miss Sunshine was about 05 or 06, so it was around that same time.
Somewhere in there.
But
yeah, but no, Love and Mercy, just that scene at the very beginning of the movie, when he's just kind of fiddling around on the piano and kind of doing just kind of like a talking head interview thing. It's, even just based on what little interview footage I've seen of Brian Wilson, kind of, that era, and it's just spot on. It's like, that guy is Brian Wilson. That is crazy. It was such a good job. And
what would you?
So forget all the Batman movies. If you haven't seen Love and Mercy, go see Love and Mercy.
Always bringing it back to those,
The other thing that, the other thing Love and Mercy helps you realize, which I think is true from everything I've read, is that Pet Sounds was Brian Wilson's album. It wasn't really the rest of the Beach Boys. It was just him. And the Beatles, I mean, even the mighty Beatles were just so impressed by that album. Basically, Sgt. Pepper's was like a response to Pet Sounds.
Yeah. Well, the story that I heard was that, or story or whatever, is that Pet Sounds was a response/reaction to Rubber Soul.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense.
And then Sgt. Pepper was a reaction to, which of course skips over Revolver, right? Because Revolver was in the middle of those two albums. But I thought I remember hearing that it was Rubber Soul that kind of inspired Brian Wilson to do Pet Sounds.
I was thinking
and then
Revolver
that
was
in turn
65 and Rubber Soul was 66, but I might be off.
Well, they were within a year of each other, but Rubber Soul was first.
Yeah,
Rubber Soul was definitely first.
This is why I could never hold my own.
And here we go. Here we go, turning into a music podcast again.
No, but it's good stuff. And that is a great thing about the movie, because they do highlight that whole, like, there's kind of that competition with the Beatles a little bit. So I don't know which albums or which songs, but there's definitely that whole playing off of each other, and that's the extent of my knowledge.
I can bring it back to BatMEN.
I was gonna say let's bring it back to BatMEN. So, I have two questions, but Mark, you go first.
So quickly, The Dark Knight. You mentioned there's a couple things. One is you said it's a little bit overrated, and I love Christopher Nolan. And I like him as a filmmaker. I've pretty much enjoyed all of his movies that he's done. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen probably 7 or 8 of them. And the weird thing about The Dark Knight, for how great I think it is, to me it's like the least Christopher Nolan of the Christopher Nolan movies. He loves to play with time. He loves dead wives. He has certain themes, like motifs, that they come up again.
Well, he did kill Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Don't spoil it. Just kidding. People
14 years ago.
I know. Yeah, the statute of limitations
14 years ago.
Yeah. So anyway, my point is, this is the one movie that he pretty much tells in a linear fashion. Out of all of his movies, they either play with time in such a weird way, like sort of the 3 parts of Dunkirk, or the in time inversion where it goes backwards in Tenet, or Memento. He does all these interesting things with time, and The Dark Knight is actually fairly traditional. It's fairly standard.
I don't know, Mark. Is it?
How is it not?
It?
Well, just think about it. Just think about it.
What?
You have to tell me.
I'm just messing with you, dude.
Okay.
Oh my God.
All right. I was like, well, what did I miss? I was gonna start watching it right now. And
The Dark Knight is told backwards.
The thing that I heard is that the Batman movies he just did for the sake of like getting the money to make the
paycheck?
movies that he wanted to make. So like I mean, I'd imagine that's why it's very. It doesn't feel very Nolan, but it does have that I think higher quality that has been tried to be replicated. You know.
No, I agree. It doesn't have his signature in terms of like kind of like Mark was saying. You know, like in terms of telling stories chronologically versus jumping around. But there are still lots of Nolan tropes that it'd be hard to watch those movies together and not think, oh yeah, this feels like a Nolan movie. For whatever reason.
Very least for the soundtrack, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hans.
Bringing it back to music. You know
I mean, there's a lot of things that are you could say are Christopher Nolan, like you said, the dead wife thing or whatever. But I mean, part of it is probably that he is making a superhero movie that's being financed by a studio that is expecting at least something that audiences are not going to be confused by or whatever, because Tenet was actually more confusing than entertaining, honestly.
I wasn't a fan of Tenet either.
I just was. I mean, I want to be challenged, but not baffled. So that's kind of how I felt, and also I couldn't understand.
You should have put that on the poster.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Anyway, here's the other thing I want to say about The Dark Knight. I think it's underrated. Well, maybe it's not underrated, but it's an extremely influential movie in terms of award season now, in terms of Oscars, because when it came out, that was back when the Oscars only did 5 nominees for Best Picture, just like every other category. Everything is 5, basically.
Now, so was that the first year that they expanded it?
Well,
or
the
was
year
that
after that. Because what happened is it was actually not only a very popular movie, it was the #1 movie of the year by far. It also made a lot of critical lists. Like, lots of critics loved it. Some critics even put it as one of their top movies of the year, and yet when the nominations came out, it did not make the Oscars, and so they felt like, okay, well, one of the things that affects the Oscar telecast ratings is if people have actually seen the movies. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, but that's really true.
Yeah.
And if you take the most popular movie of the year, or even like you don't nominate any of the top 2 or 3 or 5 most popular movies of the year, then they get a lot lower ratings. So that very next year in 2009, they expanded, and I can't remember exactly how it's done. It's like a ranked process, but you can get up to 10 Best Picture nominees, and that's what they've done in every year, all the last 12 years since, 13 years. Like this year, there are 10 nominees for Best Picture, and it's because of The Dark Knight. I mean, it probably would have.
We could debate though whether that's a good thing or not.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, man, we need to shorten it now because like there were some movies that made it last year where it just really, really confusing. That's what baffled me.
Last year, I don't know if you could ever compare, like, try to say that last year should. I mean, last year was the pandemic year, right? So there were a lot of movies. Should have been released.
Even the year before, because the Oscars happened, before the pandemic really hit. And I remember that was the year that Parasite won, but there were like a lot of other movies that made it to the top, and it was just really, really confusing, the nominations. The winners made sense, but, it's just, when you make it a little more concise, I don't know if that helps. I don't know, it doesn't feel like a legitimate award much anymore, because it's like anyone could make it, really. But
this is a conversation we've had before, where we've talked about the idea that what critics tend to celebrate and appreciate rarely lines up with what people go and pay money to see, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, should they be the same movies or not, right? And so are the critics working on behalf of the people, or are they just movie snobs? And because that's the thing, is like it's hard to look at, because I sympathize with both sides, but when I look at the movies that have been nominated for Best Picture, it's hard to argue that no, those aren't really fantastic movies, and that this Marvel movie should win instead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
But I also understand why you're not going to make $1 billion on Parasite, right? And so I don't know. I think that's something to ponder, though, is whether expanding the nominations is helpful. I mean, I guess if nothing else, it just gives people the chance to acknowledge some of these movies that they're ultimately not going to vote for.
Right.
Right. But maybe that's good enough. Just more pats on the back.
Yeah.
And more ratings.
Well,
in this age of nobody's watching live TV, there are no shared experiences.
I know, that's the other thing. That
the culture is too fragmented.
It's changing so much now that, I mean, a few years ago they did try to introduce a best popular film or something. Best popular.
I heard, yeah,
and it was just a disaster. It's like, why would you do that? It's almost like you're acknowledging, well, we're trying to pick a movie people like, but we don't really think is that great. Otherwise, it would be nominated for Best Picture. Because just like even Best Picture now,
kind of condescending.
Right, a documentary, an animated film, any movie can qualify for Best Picture, right? If it's really that good. Yeah. So they didn't do that. But the other thing is, with the 10, the thing I do like about it is usually they do acknowledge one or two really good movies that probably wouldn't make the top 5. Like Black Panther, for example, was nominated for Best Picture. It probably wouldn't have been a top 5, but apparently was a top 10, for them, for the Oscar voters. I don't know if any other like superhero type movies have made it, but certainly The Dark Knight I think would have if there had been 10 in the field.
Well, I mean that's the argument, right? Is that genre films don't do well.
Right.
That comedies, action movies, superhero movies, that's not in vogue or that's not taken seriously. Or,
right. It would be an interesting discussion, and maybe we could do it another time to talk about really what is a critic's role in speaking to the public.
Well, we should definitely do it another time because I want to talk about the Batmobile.
Oh, okay.
I want to talk about important issues, and number one is what's the best Batmobile. So that's no, seriously, I really really love this new one.
Okay.
It was. I mean, I'm a car guy, and so I've always liked cars, and the Batmobile is definitely one of the most kind of iconic movie cars. So, I thought it was really kind of cool to see this one. But do you guys have opinions on the Batmobile, or is it just me?
It just seems to be more and more techy, so I think they're cool. I mean, the ones in the Dark Knight, those Nolan movies were. I felt like it could just drive over and drive through about anything, and then it also could transform into a motorcycle.
The Batmo tank.
Yeah, it's like a Batmo tank that can also turn into that cool motorcycle with the big fat tires and all kinds of gadgets. They are really cool.
Yeah, that one's never going to be my favorite because as much as I like it, and I do really like it, just like I do like Dark Knight, even if I think it's a little tad overrated. I don't know. I just think that kind of that original sleek, Batwing looking kind of aesthetic, like even the old, 1960s, the kind of the convertible, that original Batmobile was fantastic. Like that's still one of my favorites. I have a tough time, saying that any of the others are like I do like the Tim Burton ones. As those movies went on, the Batmobile kind of got really weird, like these really crazy fins. But no, and like I said, the thing I really liked about this one is I don't know, one of the ways I describe this is that because how with the Nolan trilogy, you kind of had the feeling like, okay, well, we have the character Bruce Wayne who has unlimited funds. He's super wealthy, but he also has a connection to kind of like, it's almost kind of like a Tony Stark where like he's doing military stuff. His company's doing military stuff, so he has access, and that's how he's able to get access to that version of the Batmobile and all these other things. This new one, the Robert Pattinson one, it's like, okay, well, this guy's still super wealthy, but you almost get the feeling like they're trying to portray the Bat gadgets as things that he would modify himself. Like the Batmobile feels like it's almost kind of like a cross between a Fast and Furious car and a Mad Max car, right? Because it almost kind of looks like Dom's Charger with like a souped up jet engine stuck on the back of it, and so it's just, I don't know, if you enjoy cars, if you appreciate cars, that to me was one of the highlights of the new movie and just one of the highlights of the series in general. But
no, that makes a lot of sense because I feel like it was kind of explained in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies where it's like, you know, where he does have the money or like they already had the vehicle, so it's like that's why it was manufactured. But I kind of like that idea of just like kind of strapping more onto it in Mad Max style. I will point out, I hate to be the gamer of the bunch of you gentlemen here, but Batman Arkham Knight, that Batmobile you can play with, is super cool. And I just love all the functions of it and how it can be used for puzzle solving in very unique ways. So it's pretty dope.
That's is that a gamer term?
Yeah, I'm a gamer.
Are
girl.
you using that gamer vernacular?
Catch me on Twitch, guys.
Nice. Okay, so here's a question. I don't know if this is because I'm trying to even think if there's an answer to this as I'm thinking of the question.
Okay.
I was going to say, like, is there a most underrated Batman? Either a character or a movie or anything like.
I think everyone would say Val Kilmer, wouldn't they? Wouldn't that be the answer?
Well,
but again, I haven't seen it.
If you're saying movies, I would probably say Batman Returns. Probably the one right after the 1989 version. You just never hear people talk about it, and it's great, you know. I don't know, as far as characters, people debate, you know, Clooney and Kilmer and Keaton, and like I said, to me the Batman is more about the Joker and the villain than the Batman, so I don't have a strong opinion. I didn't like the Christian Bale when he would do that gruff, low voice. Like, I know he was masking his voice,
I wear the mask.
But it was like you could hardly understand him. Where is he? You know.
Well, it's almost like Seinfeld, where the main character is the obligatory straight man, and everybody else gets to have the fun, right? Yeah. Where, like, especially with Batman, like all of the side characters, especially the villains, are like the crazy, bounce off the walls, the real memorable. And then you think, okay, because I mean, I like most everybody who's portrayed Batman, but it's almost harder for me to say that this one performance was better than even saying this one movie was better.
Well, I think, with that, it's like Batman's so stoic, you know, there's not really much of a personality. Never really. But
I like the idea that I do tend to agree as I think about it that the Batman Returns is probably the most underrated of all the Batman movies just because it is really, really good but doesn't get a whole lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
So Danny, which ones have you seen and not seen?
I've basically not seen any of them, really, because I've seen...
Have you just been making up this whole conversation? Have you been going?
Well, this is why I have to bring up the video games, because I've seen all the Arkham video games. No, so like, so I saw Dark Knight trilogy, and then I saw Justice League, and the animated series, and that's it.
Well, you guys have to go see the original Batman movie with Adam West.
Oh,
when he's fun. I have seen lots of clips, and I do enjoy that a lot.
Nice. No, that was, well, you know, because you mentioned. Now, was it Danny? Was it you or was it Mark who mentioned that those Batman movies are kind of your introduction to superheroes? Because for me it was the Superman movies. For me it was Christopher Reeve. Mm-hmm. Like those. I remember very clearly.
Yeah, well, just think of when I was born. So I was born in '98, right? And then these movies came out early 2000s. So, like, I mean, it would be these movies and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Like, that was what superhero movies were for me. Yeah, and then, I did watch Christopher Reeve. That's true. But, like, I feel
more
like
fact.
Yeah, no, I think my dad was just so excited to show us Christian Bale as Batman. Like, he was just so excited to share this with us, and I think that's why, like, a lot of the movies that I feel most fondly for are, like, my dad's favorite movies, because he's just like, guys, you gotta watch these, and so we're all, like, sitting excited, kind of, you know, in that same position as Mark, where it's like, I'm not 13 yet, but this is cool. So, I don't know.
No, because my early exposure to Batman was the TV show. like reruns of the old TV show, the pow, zap, bang, and so, because I mean, they come out a long time earlier, but was Batman, what was that? I was 12, 13 years old, kind of like Mark, you were saying, so I don't know. It's interesting how we kind of get, it's like the first thing gives us an idea of what we think this is supposed to be, and then everything else kind of changes that or modifies it. But I don't know. Okay, well, we've talked a lot of Batman. Anybody got any final thoughts? And some other things, which is good.
Yeah.
It's fine. We cover a lot of good ground.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Like I said, next weekend I'm planning to see it, so I will have to let you know if I agree or disagree with your takes.
Sounds good. I will look forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week on the Utah Film Pod. It's been fun talking about Batman. Hopefully you guys have got some fun reactions. And if you have a favorite Batman, Batmobile, Batman movie, or maybe even an interpretation of the great Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and we'll look forward to hearing back from you. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.